Guys, and welcome back to the channel. For today's review, we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Legacy Leader Class Transmetals 2 Dragon Megatron. And what a character to round Legacy Year 1 off with. This has got to be one of the most interesting releases that we've seen so far, and I think this is our first Transmetals Megatron in a very long time, so definitely looking forward to checking out this guy as we jump straight here into the details. For the most part, a really nicely done Megatron. I think this guy looks really cool, kind of gives some of those third-party pieces a run for their money as well, but as we've seen from some of the other Legacy figures, Hasbro do have a tendency in updating the design, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst. I've always been of the opinion that there are just certain design aspects which you can't alter about classic characters, and sadly one of the coolest pieces of Megatron's design, that being the head, has undergone the biggest makeover, and for the worst. I honestly have no idea as to what they were thinking when they put this together. This bears barely any resemblance to their iconic David K. Transmetals Megatron, and it's a shame, as had they altered this, I think it would have looked way better. Not to say it's a bad sculpt, because it's not, but it's definitely not as good as I think it could have been. I do like the translucent orange here at the top, the tusks look cool, we get some nice painted details there for the teeth, and overall it definitely does look sweet, but just not as good as I think it could have been. Here at the back we get the massive dragon tail, which kind of acts as a huge dreadlock for Megatron when in robot mode, so that's all nicely done. You can see various different scale details on the back of this piece, which looks fantastic. I think the chest is one of my favourite parts about the figure. We've got this massive, almost DC Starro eye slap bang there in the centre. The purple paint looks awesome. I love how the real claws of the dragon mode are actually wrapped around this chest piece. That is some great engineering there, and the asymmetrical design for the shoulders, with this section being much bigger and of course housing the enormous dragon head arm, which we'll touch base more with when we transform this guy up. But for the more humanoid side, as you guys can see, sculpted very nicely, and I do like the red shade that they've used for this figure. That looks great. The purple highlights do a ton for the visual design. I think that looks fantastic, and the sculpt work here for the claw also looks really sweet. As we come down here to this lower region, I think the sculpt work for the thighs looks great, especially here for the side of the legs. That looks really impressive. All of the intricate mechanical detail. We've got some more scales here at the top, some sections here which stick out, and I love this huge tusk which does flare out from the shin. And Megatron has got these massive feet, of course, to hold him up nice and stable when in the dragon mode, but they've been painted so nicely. Really cool attention to detail, and we've got a massive mech tech port embedded here for the underside, and some gap fillers. These pieces are not integral for the transformation, they are merely here just to fill this in, and overall I think that looks pretty sweet. Now as we take a look at the back of the figure, this is where I have some problems. This is the leader class, and let's be honest, leaders have never been more expensive than they are at the moment, and due to dragon mode we have this huge faux chest which just hangs there, and I just think this doesn't look great at all. Had they found a way to have engineered a hinge joint so that this could have flipped into the hollow cavity on the underside, I think that would have looked way better, because the way this just sticks out I think looks really ugly. Now you can flare out the wings here when in bot mode, so just to showcase that, you're going to want to take this section which does have the purple dye over the top, just hinge these out, and as you can see it will splay all of those individual segments open, and I just think that looks so cool. I guess this is stencil Megatron. The material used definitely does remind me of some of those old stencils I'd play with in primary school. I guess you can doodle some shapes in these cutouts, but that all looks really nicely done. I love the purple fade that we have here for the hinge joint, and of course let's go full Beast Wars and splay both the wings out. That is a really impressive wingspan, and this guy from the front just looks killer with that burning orange, so definitely looking sick. Now for articulation, Megatron does have a hinge joint here at the head which can look left to right. Surprisingly, we do get some very soft ratchet joints out of the shoulders, so these can click forwards that far and back that far. The wings are individually articulated, so you can push them to the back to allow for a slightly more dynamic range of motion. We do get a hinge joint out to the side, rotation at the bicep, double joint at the elbow. Sadly no wrist swivel on this side, which is unfortunate, but loads of segmented hinge joints for the neck, which we'll touch base with when we transform this guy up. A soft ratchet joint here at the waist, which can actually rotate the full 360, so I thought that was really cool. Soft ratchets out of the hips, which can kick forwards that far, as well as back to that far. They can also kick out to the sides, which is neat. Rotation here at the thigh, as well as a way past 90-degree bend here at the knee, only on a single hinge joint. And for the foot, due to the Dragon mode, you can pivot this section here forwards and backwards, also on a soft ratchet, and we do get a fantastic ankle rocker pivot. So articulation wise, definitely really awesome. I do just wish, however, that we could have got a wrist swivel out of the slightly more humanoid looking hand. Now, considering this guy is a leader class, we also do get one accessory, that in the form of this fiery blast effect, very reminiscent to the Transformers 5 leader class Megatron. I think this looks really cool, as you guys can see, super realistic. And here for bot mode, you can use this as a club, which actually looks way better in hand than how it did in some of those official images, or how us Beast Wars fans will more than likely display him. You can peg it into the mouth of the dragon head to get Megatron using this against the Maximals when in battle, although I do wish they could have centered the MechTech port just so that it wasn't at a slight angle here when in bot mode. But definitely a very cool looking figure. I will say, however, that some of the plastic does feel slightly rubbery, especially these pieces. As you guys can see, it is all pretty flexible. I understand as to why, considering there are various different sharp edges, etc., but he doesn't feel nowhere near as substantial as the likes of the leader class Ultra Magnus, in my opinion. Now, in terms of some size comparisons, here we have the Legacy Transmetals 2 Megatron on the left and the Transformers Kingdom Leader T-Rex Megatron on the right, and both fantastic incarnations of Beast Wars Megatron. And as you guys can see, eye to eye, Transmetal's Megatron is just slightly taller than the T-Rex Megatron, although I will say I'm not an expert, but it does seem as if though the Kingdom version is a lot heftier than this guy, and dare I say slightly more complex from an engineering perspective. So that is that comparison. Here he is paired alongside the Legacy Wave 1 leader G2 Laser Optimus Prime, leader class Blitzwing, Studio Series 86 leader class Grimlock, Voyager class Optimus Primal, Rhinox, Earthrise leader Optimus Prime, Deluxe class Tarantulas and Black Arachnia, Waspinator and Pterosaur, Cheetor and Airazor, and finally Deluxe class Scorponok. And now for transformation. As mentioned previously, a lot more straightforward in my opinion when in comparison to the T-Rex Megatron. So to kickstart things off, you will want to take the dragon tail, hinge this out to the side. We can then detach the dragon chest from the body, is held in via a slot here, and what that will then allow us to do is basically take this chest piece and pull it forwards. Now you'll want to take the dragon claws and just untab those. They are held in via a tiny little slot here in the center. We can then just bring these around. Do the same here for this side. So just detach all of that. We can then take this whole section, detach it away from the body. It is held in via this slot that does house this tab. So straighten all of this out and just leave it hanging here for now. What we can then do is take this hand, and as you guys can see, we have a tab that will slide into this slot here. So snap that in there. We can then take these pieces and detach those, fold those out, and do the same here for this side. So just collapse those down. We can then take this arm. There is a tab that will peg into this slot. So hinge that in, snap that into place, and then we can rotate this entire section up. You'll then want to take this piece, rotate this around, straighten out the dragon head, and now take the wrist and hinge this section here forwards. We can then take these pieces and push them back into their original positions and do the same here. And as you guys will be able to tell, we do get two slots on either side that will be housed via these tabs. So what you have to do is kind of stretch the plastic over the top and just lock that there into place, and come around here to this side and lock that side in. Now we can come down here to the legs, much like the T-Rex Megatron, split at this section, which is way more simplistic when in comparison to the force that was needed for that Beast Wars Kingdom Megatron. And now what will happen is there is a tab here that will slide into this slot. So just snap that section in there and then collapse these pieces here upon themselves, and the chest piece is now going to hinge up, and these two slots which were originally filled by the claws will now be filled via these tabs here on the chest piece. So hinge this section here all the way up and just snap that in there nice and securely. We can then take these pieces, and as you guys can see, there is a circular cutout and just a regular cut. These are going to peg into these tabs, so snap that section in there, come to this side and snap this one in also. We can then ratchet the hips forwards just like that, bend here at the knee, and now what you'll want to do is take this section, which is locked into place for robot mode, disengage it and push it forwards all the way just like that, so it reveals some really nice scale details. Do the same here for this side, so take this section and pull this forwards just like that. Make sure that everything does stay tabbed together, and then for some finishing touches you basically take the wings, splay them out just like that, and here we have the Transmetals 2 Dragon Megatron fully transformed up into his Dragon mode, and overall looking mighty impressive, especially for a mainline leader. I'd say that this is probably the highlight out of both modes, and surprisingly very large for a modern day Transformers figure. Now as we take a closer look here at the details, just incredibly sculpted as well as painted. I think their face sculpt looks really awesome. As you guys can see, a super formidable looking Dragon mode. I think these sections here at the front looks fantastic, as so do all of the individually painted teeth, and even the eye detail is just so nicely done. You can clearly define here the ears. I just think the sculpt work in general for this piece looks so cool, and as you guys can see, a very nice purple fading going all the way throughout this neck section, which looks fantastic. And talking of scaling, I mean, come on, look at the spinal detail. That is so cool. I like the fading that we get here for the wings. They're massive, a huge wingspan, much like we saw in the robot mode. I love the neck detail, these back sections which stick out to the sides. Now you can take them and collapse them inwards for Dragon mode if you wanted to. As we just come around here to this side, as you guys can see, this here is the faux chest, the big reason why we have such an ugly backpack when in the robot mode, but overall, looking really nicely done. I love the gold paint that we have smack bang in the center, some nice scarring detail for this section which looks cool. I think the sculpt for the arms all looks really nicely done, especially here for the claws. And as we just take a look at the lower section, very similar to what we saw for the robot mode, is basically these are just the bot mode legs crumpled up, but now we can fully appreciate the tail detail, which I just think looks fantastic, especially this claw-like section at the base and all of these individual golden segments, which you'll also see here for the neck. So overall, definitely a very nicely done Dragon mode. I'd say it looks its best when posed. If you just have it kind of all extended out, it kind of looks a little janky. So my personal recommendation would be to get that neck looking to the side, and that definitely does look way cooler. Now talking of looking, in terms of articulation, we get so many ball joints here out of the neck, which is fantastic. It allows for a great range. You can get this guy looking left to right, you can get him looking up and down, which really helps for some flying poses. We do get the ratchet joint out of the shoulder, so this can also rotate left to right, which is fantastic, as well as the hinge joint, which was originally the shoulder joint. We now do get a swivel here at the tiny claws. They can hinge out to the side, bend at the elbow, as well as hinge forwards and backwards, and a rotation here at the wrist, which was really cool. I love that, and all of the same range of motion that you'd get out of the legs when in the bot form. And the tail too is also individually articulated, so loads of various different segments, which is fantastic. And the wings here can be open and splayed, so definitely a very dynamic figure, although you will have to bear in mind that this section, at least on my copy, does have a tendency to detach, so just make sure that that is jammed in there. And in terms of the blast effect for this mode, I think it's really where it shines. So we can just take that, smack that there into the center of the mouth, and you can have Transmetal Megatron raining terror down on the Maximals, which I think really and truly just looks fantastic. Now turning to some comparisons here in Dragon mode, hopefully you guys will bear with me, as this is going to be a little more tricky when in comparison to bot mode due to the scaling. But as you guys can see, we have Transmetal's Megatron compared alongside T-Rex Megatron, and if I were to fully extend the neck, this guy would just tower over T-Rex Megatron. But it is worth mentioning that, like robot mode, this guy feels way more substantial when in comparison to this new figure. And just to give you a perspective on how enormous the wingspan is, to the tip of Megatron's tail to his head, I'd say that's roughly the wingspan of Transmetal's 2 Megatron, so definitely a very, very mighty piece. But really and truly, in terms of plastic, this feels super light in comparison to the original Beast Wars Megatron. Here we have him alongside the Studio Series 86 Leader Class Grimlock. just so you guys can gather a sense of scale between these two. Yet again, Grimlock is a big leader, probably one of the biggest we've seen from the Studio Series line, and Transmetal's Megatron is much bigger, especially if you were to extend that head, but much like the T-Rex Megatron comparison, way heftier and definitely a lot better feeling plastic. This feels solid, whereas the plastic for this guy certainly does have an almost rubbery nature to it. And rounding off some of these mainline comparisons, here we have Optimus Primal alongside the Transmetal's Megatron. So a Voyager and Leader, definitely a mighty piece, and I'd say pretty in scale with how we saw him in the animation. So really cool. And so, some final thoughts for the Transformers Legacy Leader Class Transmetals 2 Megatron. In all, a very nicely done figure. Robot mode, Dragon mode, they both look great, with the exception of the bot mode head sculpt. Throughout Beast Wars, Megatron went through a lot of physical changes, but the one thing that was always kind of kept very familiar would be the face piece. It was instantly recognisable as David K's Megatron, and to see such an iconic part of the design altered here with this Legacy version, it is a shame, and considering it was the only consistent piece of the design, I would have loved to have seen it actually replicated here with this figure. But other than that, the figure's definitely good. I mean, the plastic doesn't feel nowhere near as great as even the most recent Legacy Leader Blitzwing. It's not as dense feeling, definitely does have an almost rubbery quality to it, but due to the nature of the design and how many spikes and sharp edges this character would have, I can understand as to why certain pieces have been molded in a slightly more pliable material. But articulation's cool, details are definitely on point. I think the overall figure looks fantastic, and if you're a fan of Transmetals 2, then this really is a great Megatron, and it's awesome to get something different offered and injected into the main line, as I would never have thought we would have been seeing this type of character design in 2022, especially considering in the past decade we've got like, what, one Transmetals figure, that being the Optimal Optimus, which wasn't the best if I'm going to be honest. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Definitely be sure to let me know what you guys thought of both the figure and the review, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.